All right. Hello, hello, hello. All right. So, this is probably the most excited I've ever been for any video ever. Um, because today we're going to be talking about my absolute favorite subject, which is enlightenment. So, I want you to know just something about me, which is that essentially for my entire life, the only thing I've ever cared about is this. The only thing I've ever cared about has been God and awakening and enlightenment. And I know that's weird, especially when I was a little kid. But yeah, I literally was born obsessed with God. The first words out of my mouth were asking my mom about God and about heaven and about where all the angels were. And it's funny because we weren't even religious. My mom and my dad weren't religious until I was born. And we became Christian because I had all these questions for them about God and spirituality that they didn't have any answers for, and they didn't even know where it was coming from. And so they started taking me to church because that was like the thing they had access to as whatever, right? Uh, Middle class Canadians. So, anyways, I am very, very, very excited to talk about this subject today, and I think that this will probably turn into a two-parter because I want to talk to you about why, in my experience. So this is going to be all just from my experience. I'm not here to claim that I understand what other people's experiences are. I'm not here to say that my experience is right or wrong, but I'm just going to say that this is what I have experienced, and this is what I know through my experience. And as far as I can see in my work with other people, the self love path is the most direct path to enlightenment, and more than that, to integrated enlightenment. So, an enlightenment that you can actually live, not just have an experience, right? Because I know there are a lot of people that like go on ayahuasca retreats or go on meditation retreats, or they have enlightenment experiences, but it's not who they are. It's not their life. Like there's like their real life that they live, and then their enlightenment stuff. And I feel like that's just very painful. And there is a way of living as an enlightened person. I think the other main myth that I want to bust here is that to be enlightened means that you're finished, that there's no more pain, that there's nothing more to learn, that there's no more, that you're transcended, like you're still alive and you're still in this body, but life stops happening to you. And that's not what enlightenment is. Enlightenment is a lifestyle. Enlightenment is a way of living. It's not something that takes you out of life. It's just a completely different way of living. It's a completely different way of being. And this is why, and again, it looks weird to everybody else. It looks weird to the people who aren't enlightened or who aren't on this path, because it's a complete flying in the face of what we think reality is. And so Galileo said that the truth will always be among the minority, and this is because the truth looks like a lie to the majority. The truth looks like a lie to the majority. Living an enlightened life looks like you're crazy most of the time to the majority, because it actually is so counter to conditioning. Okay? So in this video specifically, I want to talk about the 4 aspects of enlightenment, because there are 4 essentially components to awakening, to enlightenment, that all evolve. Okay, so again, it's not one and done. It's not I have my awakening experience, one in each of the 4 categories, and then I'm awakened. All of these things evolve and grow and change with time. So that's the first thing I want you to understand, is that enlightenment is not a one and done. You don't have an enlightenment experience and then that's it in that category. Every one of these 4 categories can and will be expanded because it's a part of life. All right? And that's something super important to understand, is that enlightenment is a lifestyle. It is something that changes the way that you live. It is not something that takes you out of enlightenment. So I'm going to talk about the 4 aspects of awakening that I have experienced anyways, and I'm going to talk about the pitfalls of each one of those and why the self-love path helps you not fall into the pitfalls. Okay? All right, so let's get started. So the first aspect of enlightenment, when we think of an enlightened person, or we think of an enlightenment experience, I think the first 2 are the most common things that we think of when we think enlightenment. Okay, so the first thing is the rapture experience. And that's the state of all the enlightened masters who have spoken from this very mystical, high place where they talk about, okay, so because there's kind of 2 aspects of this. So there's the identification with God, the like I am a part of God, or I feel like I am one with God, everything is God, and so there's that. But then there's this other experience that I know that I don't have the right words for, and I don't know. There are mystical poets who describe this a lot better than me. But when we think of like the Buddha or the Jesus or Rumi or these mystical people who religions were founded off of, which again is a bastardization of their teachings and their experience. But when they talk about that experience of essentially everything being blown out, like you do completely forget yourself as a self. And it's not even union with God, because that's separation, right? In order for there to be union, there has to be 2 parts that come together. So there has to be an awareness that there are 2 parts. This is not that. This is pure non-duality, where there is only one thing. There is no boundary. There is no separation. There isn't anything. It's an experience of like the void, but beyond that. It's not nothingness. Okay? It's no boundaryness. It's no separationness. It's a complete, the unity non-dual experience. And that is, I think, like the most extreme enlightenment experience we can have. And this is where we lose our fear of death, where we have our sense of there is no death, there is no time, there is no space, there is no separation, there is no you versus me versus the trees versus heaven versus earth. It's an experience of complete dissolution of all things into the one thing, right? Because like I say, it's not nothing, it's not void, it's not emptiness, it's full, it's complete fullness of all things. And that experience is something that once you have it, you can't unhave that. Once you experience that complete dropping away of all boundaries, it is pure bliss. Okay? And I can vouch for that. That it is like the best feeling ever. Like, I can only assume this must be something like what people who take drugs feel. Like when your brain is so flooded with dopamine that you're just like, this is the greatest feeling ever. That's what it is. And that rapture, that complete lack of separation, that there couldn't be another thing to be united with, You are just everything. Everything is you. You are everything. There is no boundaries. There is no everything. Like I say, this is why it's so difficult to describe, because it's not like anything you've ever experienced before. It's not like anything you've ever known in materialism. It's completely outside of that. And so that experience, I believe, is where there is no death. There is no separation. There is no destruction. There's nowhere for anything to go. That's where you lose the fear that this life is so serious and everything that happens here is so serious. And I think this is the thing that makes people who have had that experience either incredibly attractive, like, oh my God, you have something, like people recognize, like, you have something and I want that thing that you have, and I don't know what it is and I don't know why you're so different, because yeah, like, you're weird and you do this and you do that and you live different, and this is where the gurufying comes from, because we can sense that there's that you have something, you felt something, you've experienced something, you know something that I don't know, and it's that thing you can't give anyone. Like, I can't give you that experience. But like I say, it's the thing that makes it so that you live on a different plane. You view life through a completely different lens for the rest of your life after you have this experience. And so, like I say, this is what makes people either like so attracted to people who have had this experience, so attracted to you, or repulsed, because it blows apart absolutely everything that most people are building their lives around. Right? The world that we live in right now, the reason we call it a false matrix, the reason we say that it's all built on fear and a lie, is because the Western world especially, but most people are living from a place of consciousness that separation is real. That separation is the only thing that's real. And that materialism is real and the only thing that is real. And that is, all of that has to dissolve in order to have this experience. All of that has to dissolve. Like, literally everything that people are building their entire lives around has to be let go. So this is why I think this rapture experience is the most rare, because it is the most far from what we are experiencing as 3D humans living this separation experience, as though this material reality is real, the only thing that is real, and our separation and our identification with self is the only thing that's real. So the trap with this, the main trap that we get into with the rapture experience is that we never want to leave it, and that we get addicted to it. It can become an addiction. When we're not on the self-love path and we're not having an integrated enlightenment experience where we can access that feeling even within the separation experience, which is what we will always be in here on the earth, when we don't understand that that is available within this, that is not a separate experience from this, we will become addicted to that and we will chase it. Okay? So, or like I say, it will be a thing where we don't want to come back. And I think my sister is here and she can probably vouch for me going into meditation and having this rapture experience many times, and her like literally feeling like she's not going to come back. Like, she would be sitting there sensing that I was somewhere else, and like, holy shit, feeling like she was going to lose me, like I wasn't going to come back, because that experience is so powerful and so profound and literally takes all your pain away. Like, that's another like part of it, is that it's complete liberation. Like, literally, it's just this feeling of like all of the problems don't exist because none of this separation exists. I I am everything. Everything is me. And so, yeah, Sam says, like that you can, the trap with that, if you don't know how to integrate that into your everyday life, it will be that you don't ever want to leave that experience. Okay, so that's the first part. Second part of realization is realization of oneness with God. So that's the God experience where you still identify as a self. So there's still duality within it, right? It's not the rapture experience where there's no duality. And there isn't a you uniting with God. It's everything is God and you are everything and everything is you. There is no separation. So that's the first one. Then there's the I am one with God experience. Okay, so that's a second enlightenment experience. And this is where you identify beyond your reality. This is again a kind of ego death where you realize, yes, exactly, that you and God are one. And I would say it's different than this. It's where you realize that you are infinitely connected to God, that you have access to God. That's the second awakening experience, where you feel that love, that unconditional loving presence that supersedes shame and guilt and takes all of the I might be evil, there might be something bad or wrong about me, or something wrong about my experience, or I'm trapped and I'm never gonna get out of these problems and all of this. That's what this experience is. This feeling of being unconditionally loved by something. So you're still identifying as you. I still identify as myself being loved by God or by the universe or Krishna or whatever it is that you kind of conceptualize. So this is why in this thing, because there's still duality in it, and a lot of us are going to experience it through the lens of our culture, right? The mind is going to make it something that makes sense to us. So for me, when I first started experiencing this, it came through the lens of Christianity. I was a Christian mystic, right? I was having a one-to-one direct relationship with Jesus. And I was sitting in my room and I was praying and I was feeling Jesus talking to me. I was feeling him loving me. That my first connection to this was through my culture of Christianity. And so that was the Christian mystic experience, essentially. And as I have grown and as I have matured, I still have this experience, but it's no longer through the lens of Christianity. It's no longer through the lens of culture. It's literally just a feeling of this unconditional love presence. Okay? So this, and like I say, it helps you to identify beyond this. That this body isn't my body and all there is to me. That my experience isn't all there is to me. That my emotions aren't who I am. This is how we start to be able to witness ourselves. Okay, like this experience of connection to God. So not oneness with God, connection to God helps us step into the witness where we can start to say, oh, okay, right? I am not my emotions. I am experiencing my emotions. I am not my body. I am experiencing my body. I am not my thoughts. I am experiencing my thoughts. There's something more to me. And I'm going to just say that, like, for me, like especially right now in the world we're living in where we're really into identity politics and we're everyone's looking for their identity and everyone's got like 4 titles or like 8 titles of like what they are. I have never resonated with that, and I don't resonate with that, and because I've never, like most people, had such a strong identity because I was having these experiences so young that I don't think I ever fully integrated into being like a human. Like I didn't ever fully identify as just myself. And like, I'm a woman, I'm a straight, I'm smart, I'm white, I'm all these things. I I have always had a hard time with that and have always felt a little bit um, androgynous, a little bit just, I kind of don't really care what you think my identity is, and I haven't ever been so concerned with like pinpointing my identity. Again, because again, most people are looking to identify so strongly because they're looking for connection. We're looking for, if I can identify myself clearly enough, I can find my people. I can find all the people that have the same identifying markers as me, and then I will feel connected. Whereas I've always known that that's not what separates us, right? Our different ego costumes and the things that we are here to just express and be, the aspect of God that we're just here to, as the fractalized version of, isn't what separates us and isn't what connects us. Okay, so this trying to find your identity is so much about finding safety. And we have to completely validate that because so much of people's identities have made them unsafe. Okay, that's a very real human thing that we have experienced, and I do not want to minimize that in any way. People with marginalized identities have experienced being very unsafe because of their identities. But that's rooted in the human matrix false understanding that separation equals threat. Right? That you being different than me means you're going to take my resources. And that's something that we've all come to very reasonably from all of humanity being that way. When we did not know how to survive, we were all very traumatized in this world. The other tribe was going to take your shit. The other person was going to take your shit. We learned that we had to cooperate in order to survive, but still we could overpower each other. We could take from each other. We could be the reason we survive, or we could be the reason we die. And so this trying to find your identity makes perfect sense, and I don't want to shame that or pretend like that's not real, but all I'm saying is that's still rooted in the trauma of being separate and that separation causing us to behave in ways that are out of alignment with truth, which is another part of awakening later. So there's that I am oneness with God. I am connected to God. I have this infinite love available to me at all times. The second half of the mystical experience being that connection to God. And like I say, and then that helps us to identify beyond our identity. That helps us to identify beyond this reality. And so again, we start to lose our fear of death, we start to lose our fear of sickness and pain and the way that life is, because we finally are able to feel love no matter what's happening, which is the trauma that we all experience in our childhoods. Yes? That feeling of if I'm in pain or if there's something wrong or if I'm doing something wrong or if I am a way that people don't accept or understand, love goes away. And therefore, provision goes away. So when we feel unconditional love, we feel unconditional safety, which brings our nervous system into rest and digest. And then the rest of enlightenment is possible. So this feeling of being fully loved for whatever you are right here, right now, in this moment, is what self-love is. Yeah? It's an enlightenment experience. That you can literally make yourself feel safe anywhere, anytime. You have access to this love no matter what. Okay? So now, the pitfalls with this is that then people can start to make it mean that I don't exist, that my ego is not a thing, and that enlightenment means that there is no little I. Okay? And that is a trap, because there will always be a little you. Okay? And that's the kind of, it's it's connected to this next part as well, okay? So there's that unintegrated enlightenment God connection experience, which says, I am God, and therefore I am not me. I'm not my emotions, I'm not my experience, and therefore it doesn't exist. It's an illusion. This human experience isn't an experience that I actually need to participate in, or it's not real. That only one of these two things can be real. Either I'm one with God, or I'm a self. So if I'm one with God, I'm not a self. Or if I'm a self, I'm not one with God, because that's the trap. That's the trap right there. Is that if we make it that only the God connection is the real thing, every time we have a self experience, we're dropped out of enlightenment. We feel like we lost our enlightenment. You see? That's why it's a trap. Because no, you didn't lose your enlightenment. The only way to have your enlightenment experience is through yourself. The only way to have an enlightenment experience is through a self. If there is no self, there is no self to connect with God. You see? And then you're just in rapture, and then that's not life. Which, right, we know that there are the ancient yogis that go into the caves and just live in samadhi. But then they don't live. They're not living. They're not having a life. They're just in samadhi, in the body. Which, fine. But for most of us, that's not what our souls actually want to do. That's not self-expression. That's skipping out on the whole purpose of life, which is to live and have experiences, and for consciousness to learn about itself through its interaction with itself. Okay? So the trap of the identifying with God is you then stop identifying with yourself. You try to stop identifying with yourself, and then every time you have a self experience, which you're gonna have, right? All of us are then gonna wake up from that and have to go poop and have to eat and are gonna have to pay our bills and are gonna have to figure out some way of living. And if we can't integrate those two things, we are going to cause ourselves to suffer quite a bit, right? If we are making being an individual self mean we're not connected to God because these two things can't be the same, that's duality, and that's unintegrated enlightenment, and that's very painful. So the self-love path, again, takes us out of that trap because it allows us to have an awareness of God, an awareness of how to connect with that feeling of being unconditionally loved for who we are as we are connected with God, that nothing separates us from God, that no sin, no pain, no thing that we've done wrong, no mistake, no anything separates us from God. That's the illusion. That we can be separate from God is the illusion. That we can do something or be something or say something or experience something that takes us out of love. Right? We learned that in our childhoods. We learned that from humanity. Humanity can absolutely stop loving you. Humanity can absolutely exile you. You can lose your safety in your childhood where you were fully dependent upon your caregivers for everything and they had to approve of you to help you survive. But in real adulthood, in real enlightenment, you realize, no, this morality shit is a lie. That is a lie. That is a false matrix. The fact that I think I can do or be something that separates me from God is a duality understanding. God is everything. God is everyone. So yes, I'm sorry, but God is Hitler. God is Donald Trump. God is all the people you hate. Just living in separation. But they are not outside of God. Because there is no outside of God. God is everything. We are looking for what's good and what's bad, and that is a misunderstanding of the fourth part of enlightenment, which is alignment. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a second. But the self-love path helps you to understand that you cannot be disconnected from that love. That there is no reason to cut yourself off anymore. And that now as an adult, you get to decide through working with your nervous system and working with your beliefs and working with yourself if you're going to be connected to reality or not. Okay? And reality is that you cannot do anything, be anything, say anything, experience anything that takes you out of love. And again, this is something that secularism fears. Because people think if you think you can love yourself at all times, if you're going to give yourself permission to be loved no matter what you're doing, you're going to be Hitler. You're going to go and just commit a whole bunch of evil acts because there's this false understanding that human beings are just inherently harmful, and that's not true. Human beings who are living in separation are inherently harmful because they don't understand how reality works. They truly believe they are separate, and therefore it makes logical sense that I can take something from you and then I have it, and that's great. That's separation consciousness. But when you understand that we are all one, that if you take something from someone, you are taking it from yourself. Because there is nowhere to go. There is only one. That's the third part of enlightenment. So everyone is afraid of the self-love, God realization experience in others and in ourselves. Because we all think it's going to lead us to being evil. But we're wrong about what's evil. We're wrong about where evil comes from. And we're wrong about the fact that when we love ourselves, we don't become more evil. When we have access to unconditional love, our nervous systems become safe, and then we can learn about real reality, which is part 4, which will always drive us towards alignment. Okay? So part 3 of enlightenment is realizing your connection to all that is. Realizing your connection to all of humanity, realizing your connection to nature, realizing that yourself is a part of the ecosystem of everything. That it's not just you being isolated, alone here, having this isolated experience. Okay, the blowing of your awareness that you are not just you. Most empaths were born already with this part of enlightenment integrated. This is what empaths are experiencing. The feeling of being not just yourself. You can feel others' emotions. You can feel others' thoughts. You can feel the consequences of your actions beyond just what happened right here, right now. You can feel the consequences of your actions beyond what happened just right here, right now, in front of your face logically. That's the third enlightenment stage, where you empath, feel other people and the consequences of your actions beyond logic. That's the third part of awakening. Okay? Where you start to recognize again, you're not just yourself. You are yourself that is a part of a living matrix of all of nature and all of humanity. That your actions, that you live in a closed system. That's the third part of awakening, right? So it's from the most esoteric to the most practical. So this third awakening is that awakening to your connection to all things, to all humans, to empathy. And again, the second part of it, well, I think this is more actually the fourth part, so I'll talk about that more. But you recognizing that, again, your individual identity doesn't actually disconnect you from everybody else. And that everyone else's individual identity doesn't disconnect them from you. That we are all one unit. And it's kind of like when you have a revelation of the body. So if I ask you the question, is the body one unit? Is the body one thing, or is it made up of billions of component parts? And the only true answer is both. Right? Because if we say it's just one unit, how much of reality do we have to deny? A lot. Because there's the brain, there's the eyes, there's the liver, there's the nose, there's the face, there's the skin. That we cannot deny that the body is made up of component parts. But if we say the body is just component parts, we deny that it's a whole, and that those component parts only function within the whole. You see? And the whole only functions with the component parts. And there is no such thing as nourishing the liver and poisoning the kidney. There's no such thing as giving something to the foot taking something from the hand to give to the foot that would actually benefit the foot. Because if we injure the hand to help the foot's connected to the hand. You see? So this is exactly how we are as a humanity. There is no separation. You cannot do what is actually good for you and be harmful to everyone in real reality. So again, this is part of the confusion of being an empath. Of, again, what society thinks is good for them is wrong most of the time. What we think is beneficial is not. What we think is harmful is not. So when you start to actually align with yourself, so this is again part 4, but when you start to live in alignment with what's correct for you, it might look like people around you are upset with you because they think you're hurting them. But the ultimate truth is, when you do what is actually good for you, because of your inherent connection to everything and everyone, it is actually in real reality what's good for everyone. When you do something that's harmful to you, even though it might look like that's good for others in the short term, this is where we get self-sacrifice and martyrdom. In the long term, it hurts everyone. Because we are connected. You cannot nourish yourself without nourishing the whole. You cannot authentically hurt yourself without hurting the whole. This is how reality functions. And so this third part of awakening is when you start to empath others. You start to feel what others are feeling. You start to know. You start to feel the consequences of your actions. You're doing things that logically seem right, but it feels bad. And then you think there's something wrong with you. You think you have anxiety. You think you have depression. You think you're neurotic, whatever. No. You're feeling the failings of our materialistic, intellectualized world that does not understand reality. You are starting to understand it. And you're understanding it through feeling. Okay? That's something we're going to talk about in a second. So the trap of this part of the awakening is that you become a martyr. You become, again, disconnected from yourself. And you start to, this is the social justice warrior. Okay? If you watch the Spiral Dynamics video, this is the green person who's just fully, oh my God, I'm connected to everyone, and now I'm responsible for everyone and everything. It's my job to go out and fix the world of all of its ills. And everyone's pain is my pain, and everyone's problems are my problems, and everything that's out there I have to fix, I have to change, I have to solve. That's where I've lived my life, most of my life, is in this kind of, the trap of this awakening and this awareness of empathy is where you feel over-responsible for everyone. Over-responsible for everything. We lose the sense of, okay, but we are still individuals who are making individual choices, and I can't actually make a choice for others. I can't actually heal others. The only thing I can do is align myself. And that is the best thing I can do for everyone else. And sometimes that alignment will look like offering food or offering money or offering whatever, but not at the expense of myself. And not overtaking responsibility and assuming that this is going to make this other person do this thing that I think is of alignment, right? This is where it can get into this place where we start to think we know what is right. And we know what everyone should be doing. And we know, and we can feel their pain, and we think we know how to get them to where and that's wrong. Right? We can feel others' pain. We can feel the pain of the world. But then it then has to come down to, okay, well, where's my alignment? Okay, which is step 4. So the 4th part of awakening is understanding that reality has a structure, that you are a part of that structure, and that in order to live your life, okay, an aligned life, in order to live an enlightened life, so you're not choosing to go into samadhi and then just be in that state. You're going to be an enlightened human who has an enlightened human experience. How do we integrate all of that? How do we live all that? Right? All these awarenesses of God, unity, and self-love, and what does that actually mean? How do we integrate that? How do we live that as a lived experience? Part 4. We understand that we as an ego, we as an individual, are the God experience for ourselves. Without us having this individual self, there could be no awakening. There could be no enlightenment. There could be no consciousness. And we settle into the reality that we are consciousness learning about itself through our individual experience. That all of this separation, right? Like in the Christian myth, the devil, who tempted Adam and Eve into the awareness of good and evil. Satan is God. Separation is God. This separation experience is how God is learning about God. It's how consciousness is knowing about itself. Because if it stayed in that unified state, which unity is not even the right word, if it stays in the non-dual state, it's just, there are no boundaries, there is no separation, it's the amorphous blob of love. With no boundaries, like even doing this is wrong. There's no boundaries. It's everything. Forever, infinity. It can't know itself. We can't know the body until we take it apart. We have to do the autopsy. When we just look at it as a blob, we don't understand how it works. So consciousness, through us, through the individual experience, is learning about itself. And the mechanism that we have for this is, okay, and then this is where evolution is possible. Because it looks like, or feels like, on some level, consciousness is expanding itself. The universe is expanding. How could it do that? Through knowing itself, knowing its structure, and then building upon the structure. So now, what is evil or misalignment from an enlightened perspective? Well, from the highest enlightenment perspective, there is no evil. We learn from everything. Everything is information that lets us know. In alignment, out of alignment with reality. There's no judgment. From the highest perspective, and that's what, again, humans don't like that. Because we identify so strongly with the body and with this experience. And that death is wrong. And death is bad. And suffering is wrong. And suffering is bad. And these things should not be happening because they hurt. When we're so identified with the self and with not understanding that there's something beyond this and that death is scary, we don't want to hear that it's okay to suffer, that there's no punishment for it, that there's no judgment. Because then that makes us feel like it's okay and it's never going to end. But that's not what it means. It just means there's no punishment. The punishment is the pain we experience now, essentially. If you even want to think of it that way. But pain isn't punishment. So from the self-love perspective, it's fully safe to be in pain. It's fully safe to be chaotic and destructive because that's how we're learning. We bring our nervous systems into safety. And then alignment becomes actually possible. Where we come to this place of like, alignment isn't good or bad, right or wrong. And alignment isn't ultimate. We're never going to be ultimately aligned. Not in this human experience. Because there always has to be room for growth in the human experience. Expansion, evolution, change. There is no heaven within this. There is only journey. So we live an enlightened lifestyle where we integrate. I'm already there. I have what I want. Right? Because the reason we're all trying to go for perfection, the reason we're all coming to spirituality, coming to self-help, the reason we're all so taken by materialism is because we think there's a way to get to something in life where life stops happening, where pain stops happening and it's only pleasure from there on out. And that's because we don't understand. That quest isn't totally wrong, is what I'm trying to say. It's where we're looking for it that's wrong. Living an enlightenment lifestyle means you understand how to connect with that love, with that rapture, whenever you want. You do these practices. You do this work to decondition, deprogram everything that you've learned about life. Essentially, this is why I teach what I teach. This is why my mystery school is a 2-year self-study program that should take you like 10 years. This is why I say I have been doing this work literally since the day I was born. This is not simple. Deconditioning, deprogramming, we're going to talk about it in the next video, is so fucking hard. But you do this work so that you can get beyond intellectual materialism, which tells you that this is all that there is and that happiness is going to come from this. It's not. This is always going to be changing. There will always be pain and pleasure. So long as you're alive, you're going to be having to have new experiences. You have to do something different all the time. There's no keeping anything the same, not in this reality. Alignment comes from knowing how to learn from that. Alignment comes from knowing how to say, okay, this hurts. Why? What's the cause? In real reality. Feeling. And then intellectualizing. And the only way you can do that is if you know that pain doesn't mean you're bad. That pain doesn't separate you from God. That one thing you want is to feel safe. That it's okay to be you. And that is not going to come from materialism. That doesn't come from everything we're being sold. So the world, the false matrix that we're in, knows that we're all seeking this. Unconsciously, but consciously. This is what we're all after. We want to feel unconditional safety, to be ourselves so we can live life. Life is not inherently suffering. It isn't. Life inherently has pain. Absolutely, because that's how we're learning about ourselves. We have to go out of alignment, to push the boundaries, to make mistakes in order to learn where the boundaries are, what the boundary is, and then we can build upon it. But we can't do that if we're making running up against a boundary mean we are disconnected from God, disconnected from love, disconnected from resource. And we project that. We have created a reality where we cut people off from resources for not aligning with our version of consensus reality. We've created that false matrix. So we live it. So it's real, but it's not real. Not in the ultimate sense. So you liberate yourself from the false matrix when you know how to access love no matter what. When you know you can have love no matter what. When you know you can have love no matter what. In your pain, in your ego identity, in your confusion, in your misalignment, in your mistakes, in your all the things. When you have access to self-love, which is just God all the time. You stop being manipulatable. Because materialistic intellectualism, which is the world we live in right now, tells you you're afraid to be cut off. Here are all the rules that make it, and it tells you that that connection to humans is the thing you're looking for. And it isn't. Connection to humans will never, ever satisfy. We all say we're social beings and we're looking for connection and blah, 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 blah. Sure. And like, right? Of course, historically we needed each other to survive. But a connection to a human is never, ever, ever gonna fill this void. It doesn't matter how much you perfectly identify and have boiled your identity down to all these perfect things and you found all your perfect people who fit into your perfect identity, you will never feel connected. Because the ways that we are different, there is no one like you. There will always be something not the same about everyone. It doesn't matter how specific your group gets. Everyone is still going to have a thing that makes them different. And if different means you're disconnected, you're fucked. Because you're different from everyone. You're different from everything. And then again, you're going to try and get rid of your ego. And you're not going to be able to, because it's a part of this reality. Right? Everyone who says they've had their ego death and now they just realize themselves as one, I'm like, sure, okay. So then how did you choose your clothes? I'm going to assume you chose your food based on preference. Well, that's not God. God doesn't have a preference. Right? And you're going to be constantly breaking your own enlightenment experience through trying to pretend you don't have an ego. It's just the exact same, it's literally the same delusion as I am only my ego. To say I am not my ego. They're the exact same level of delusion. No. Your ego is a part of God. That's it. So you're going to live as your ego. And it's through your ego that you will find your connection to God and everything. And then alignment with this temporary reality. Because you're still here. You're doing this. You're becoming aware of God itself through your experience of you. So an integrated enlightenment experience is not one that takes you out of the human experience. It's one that takes you out of suffering. It doesn't take you out of pain. It teaches you how to deal with pain, which is learning from it. It's not something about me. You don't identify with it anymore. It's just a learning experience. Mistakes happen. You get rejected. Humanity doesn't understand you. You become so different. And this is part of what we all have to go through to break our connection to materialistic intellectualism. We have to go through the process of being rejected. We have to go through the process of experiencing that rejection as an adult and learning how to love ourselves safe, have a God experience, even when we lose people, so we can understand that it's not people that provide for us what we want and need. People is not where safety comes from. So the only way to sustain an enlightenment experience is if your enlightenment experience includes you. Because you are always going to be here in you. Without this, there is no enlightenment. Which is why self-love is the most direct path. Self-love will take you out of your conditioning. Will give you these unity experiences. Because losing your identity is really a misnomer. What happens in these God experiences is you expand your identity. Your sense of self becomes inclusive of greater and greater and greater and greater, right? It extends out to all of humanity, then all of nature, then the universe, then the multiverse, then everything. You don't lose yourself. Yourself becomes everything. Your concept of yourself expands out beyond you, farther and farther and farther, to include more and more and more. The ego death is, I am not just this. There is not just this life. And you can't understand it intellectually. That's why the secular world will never get you there. You can't get it through acceptance of people. The secular world will never get you there. You can't get it through materialism and what seems logical and reasonable to our minds right now, and things. Abundance is not going to make you feel it. Enough so that you don't feel, that's why I talk about enough is enough. Enlightenment is very difficult when you don't have enough. And it's very difficult when you're attached to having way more than you need. That's why it's called the middle way. Jesus said in the Bible, if you believe in Jesus, but this metaphor is really true, that it is harder for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to realize God. And it's true. Not having enough, being in scarcity, enlightenment is very difficult. I don't want to make it a limiting belief, but it is very difficult because you're going to be preoccupied with trying to keep yourself alive, because you can't really have all these experiences if you're not alive. So not having enough, being in scarcity, is very, very difficult. Being attached to materialism and thinking that your happiness and your survival and your identity and your purpose and all these things is going to come from abundance, from being in the world and being approved of and being popular and being all of these things, equally delusional. Equally no. It's not it. So don't listen to these spiritual fucking teachers who are telling you that you need abundance or that you deserve abundance, blah, blah, blah. You deserve enough to not have to worry about it. But that is a distraction. Those people are not spiritual. That is the devil positioning itself as God, which it is, but it's a trap. Enough so that you can step out of culture. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next video. But this is what this is. This is what enlightenment is. And the reason self-love gets you there is because it's the one way that you have control over your nervous system to have access to the love that awakens you to all of this, no matter what. Without any dogma, without a guru, without rules, it's again, you don't have to be eating a perfectly clean diet. You don't have to be completely benevolent, no plastic, all of these things you think you have to be in order to be good enough to experience God. That's what the self-love path erases, so that you can have your enlightenment experience now. You can be having it and living it and growing it, and then you can live your life of alignment. Because life of alignment comes from feeling, not intellect. When you connect with feeling, then you will understand. That's why this path of enlightenment cannot be intellectually understood. You have to experience it. It's a feeling. And our intellectual world does not understand that. And therefore, it will never get you there. It doesn't have the one tool. So this is why what I teach in my mystery school is feeling. Connection to love right now. And it's hard and it takes forever. But it's the fastest way for it to be sustained. And then you don't fall into any of the dogmas and the traps of all these other paths. So we're going to talk about more this next week. But I hope that was a good overview. I hope you understand that enlightenment only happens through you. And if you are the thing that breaks your enlightenment experience because you are not integrated, then you'll never have an enlightenment experience. So self-love is the most direct path. I love you. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Mwah.